What would they say about you, your friends, behind your back? Is it good stuff? Do they say good things? Do they know you to be someone who is trustworthy? Do they say, oh, yeah, I know him. He's honest. And when I need help, he's always there. He's always there when I need help. Or maybe, oh, she has always been someone that listened to me and has nice things to say. I would trust her with my life. Are you someone that people would trust with their time, their effort, their emotion? Can you be friends with people? The more they get to know you, will they trust you more or less as they uncover more information about your life? You know, in the 80s and 90s, there was a very famous type of movie where there'd be these secret agents. And there's still a couple that come out now, but they're secret agents and they live a double life. And on the one hand, they're the family man, and he does everything, and he's at all the ball games. And then when the kids go to bed, he puts on his perfect suit and he jumps in his Aston Martin and he goes and he fights crime. You know, he's got a dual life. Do you live as someone who has another life that if more information about your life was uncovered, people would trust you more? Or maybe they would say, ooh, well, I didn't know that about him. I want to look at a passage from Psalm chapter 9. Psalm 9, verse 10. And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Who knows you? Who knows your secret thoughts? The things about you that maybe you hope that nobody would know. Now, for most of us, it's going to be our spouse. My spouse knows everything about me, and I'm happy. But that doesn't always come with more trust. Sometimes that comes with difficulty. You clash, and you have to work your way through those things. What about your family members, your friends, the church here? You don't want a preacher that lives a double life. You want someone who is that what you see is what you get. But the more you know about someone, are you going to trust them more or less? The more I know about God, the more I trust God. So I would say, Lord, those who know your name put their trust in you. Because you've never forsaken anyone who seeks you, ever. It's never happened. God has never forsaken anyone. Now I have. I'll be the first to tell you, I have made that mistake. I've messed up. I should have been here. I wasn't here. I'm sorry I let you down. Who hasn't let someone down? But God is there as a great example. So I want to look at a few passages. Turn to Matthew chapter 7 as we consider this idea of building trust. How do I build trust with someone else? Matthew 7, starting in verse 15. Jesus is going to tell us about some characters. I had a young man approach me a couple months back, and he said, I don't know how to rebuild the trust that I have lost. I made a mistake. What do I do? And that's very common. First of all, you're not alone when you go through something where you are the one making the mistakes. And now you have to rebuild trust. It's a very difficult thing to do. But how do we do it? Do we lie and try to put on a good face? Maybe if they thought I was 10 feet tall and had no problems and was perfect, then they would accept me back quicker, and then I could work from the inside. That's what we think when we're young, right? Once they like me, then I can solidify my position. Or do you be completely honest? You be contrite, repentant. Maybe you have to be crafty. What do we do? How do we rebuild trust? So here's the question we should ask. How does God build trust? How do we trust in God? And as you see, when we look at the life of Jesus and how he did it, it's going to make a lot of sense. How did people trust Jesus so much? Well, the more you know, the more you mistrust with some people. Jesus is going to warn us that there are some people that we should not trust. You shouldn't trust everybody. Matthew 7:15-20, beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits, by their actions, by their words. You're going to see them living their life, and it's going to show you, oh, I shouldn't trust this person. Now, God is merciful, and he gives us second chances. But we'll talk more about this in a moment. Jesus is saying, beware. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree brings forth good fruits, but a corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit. He's asking a very simple question. When you go to gather something that's delicious and good for you, do you get a whole bunch of thorns together and just, this is what I like? It's sticking you, it's cutting you, and you say, yeah, this is good. No, we don't do that. We parse through that nonsense, and we'll get the thing that's good for us, and that's what we take. We don't bring the thorns with us. Let's keep reading. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that brings not forth good fruits is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits you shall know them. James would write about this in James chapter 3. Can a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Does an olive tree bear figs? Or the other way around? It's very confusing the way that he writes it, but I appreciate it. No, it's not. There is one way that you should be, and you are going to know these people by their fruits. Should I trust this person? Now, when someone causes you to mistrust them, it's not an unnatural response to put up a defense. In fact, it's a survival instinct. We've got to watch out for these wolves. Think about Ananias and Sapphira. Here's a good example of people that they were in it for a specific reason, and you're going to see what this reason is. Every time you see these people, these types of people spoken of by Jesus or the apostles, or even in the Old Testament, they have one thing in mind. What did Ananias and Sapphira do? They sold their goods, and they kept back a big portion of it, and then they gave the rest and said, here is everything that we got. They lied. Now, why would you do this? It's for yourself. It's for your image. It's to manufacture an image for other people to see you as greater than you are in their eyes. Jesus would warn a lot about doing things to be seen of men. These wolves, Ananias and Sapphira, they're doing it as a lie to boost themselves up. That's what it's all about. Look at Acts chapter 20, verses 29 and 30. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away the disciples after them. That's the purpose. I want my own disciples. I want you to follow me. I want me to be glorified. I want to be better in your eyes than I actually am. That's a way to harm trust. And when we do it in our relationships, that's why we do it. That's why we hurt people's trust. It's selfish. And then we turn and we say, I thought you had my interest at heart. And that hurts us. And then here's what we think. When it's time for them to decide, them or me, they're going to choose themselves. I don't trust them because they won't pick me. That's mistrust. And Jesus says, watch out for those that have their own interests at heart. But here is how you build trust. Look at what Jesus did. We have 3 examples. Turn to the book of Mark, and we're going to read Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 24. Here is an example. We'll read the first one, and then I'll give you 2 other examples. Starting in verse 24. And from thence Jesus arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon and entered into an house, and would have no man know it, but he could not be hid. They were looking for him. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Jesus said unto her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, for this saying, go thy way, for the devil is gone out of thy daughter. And when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. This was a remote healing done by Jesus. This was a Bluetooth healing. He sent some of his healing. This shows the power of God. But here is an aspect of the relationship people had with Jesus. You can read of the centurion's servant in Luke chapter 7, 1 through 10. The centurion comes and says, my servant is very ill. I know you can heal him. There was an official in Capernaum. His son needed help, and he came to Jesus and said, I know you can help him. And Jesus remotely healed these people. But from the time they were healed to when the time they asked for it to when they were walking home, I wonder what they were thinking. Did they trust, well, I know that they're healed. I know Jesus has healed my son. And he's running home. He's healed my son. Or were they wondering, I hope he's healed my son. You see, there was time in between there. But they trusted Jesus enough to come to him and say, you're the one that can help me. And you can help my son. I need help. And Jesus remotely heals these people. And they go home. And when they come home and they see it's all better, what kind of trust do you think that built in those people? My son is healed. Jesus said it was done, and it's done. There is an honesty. There is a success that goes into what Jesus does. So it's one thing to say wonderful and nice things. Well, I hope it gets better for you. James would have something to say about that. If you just say, go thy way, be warmed and filled, and you don't actually do something about it, it doesn't mean anything. Your religion is in vain. You're dead. And what Jesus would do is he would take care of the problem. And it was successful. So he would say honest and true things, and he would follow through. But I like this idea of Jesus could say it was done, and then they had to go home and it was proved right every single time. And what you'll see with God is when God says something will happen, it happens every single time. And in the flesh, Jesus proved it every single time. And he never let anyone down, ever. He never forsook those who sought him. They went looking for Jesus, and they said, Jesus, I know you can help me. And he never said, I don't have the time. Sorry, I can't help you. I don't want to help you. Maybe next week. And then I forgot about them. That's not how Jesus operates. That's not how God operates. And so we had this sermon this morning on prayer, putting legs on your prayers. Don't be surprised when they come up, yes. These people went directly to Jesus. I wonder if they were surprised when they made it home. Jesus cares for you. And do we trust that he can heal from afar today? I know he can. There are some verses on trusting in God that I would like you to listen to as we move into this next portion. I'm going to read them. I want you to hear what they have to say. The prophet Isaiah wrote, "You keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed, fixed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock. He will never move. He is fixed. He's an anchor." The psalmist writes again, Psalm 37:5, "Commit your ways to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act." He will act. It doesn't say trust in him, and maybe if you are a good boy. No, trust in the Lord. The Lord will act on your behalf. Psalm 20, verse 7, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God." Proverbs 28:26, "Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered." Whose wisdom? God's. So, when Jesus says, "Here is the life that I have made for you, and if you walk this way, it's the best life that you could have. You'll have the forgiveness of sins. You'll have the love of a family. You'll have the love of a family in an everlasting life after this. You'll have a relationship with God. You'll have my providential care." When he says those things, if we say, "Well, it's my own wisdom, I think I can figure it out, thank you," your trust in God will not grow if you don't cooperate with him. Isn't that what it says? "And those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you." You have to seek God. You have to look for him. You have to put your trust in him. There are two scriptures that work well together. Deuteronomy 31:8 and Hebrews 13:5 and 6. Deuteronomy 31:8 reads this, "Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, 'Be strong and courageous, for you shall go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you, ahead of you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. God is with you." And then in the New Testament, the Hebrews writer puts it this way, "Keep your life free from love of money, and be content with what you have. For he has said, I will never leave you, nor forsake you." So we can confidently say, "The Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" God is with us. I can confidently say, I trust in God, whatever comes my way. So, how do I build or rebuild the trust that maybe I have damaged? God is perfect, and he shows us perfect examples. You can see so many examples of how we should act. I mean, just the example of love, of perfect love that God gives to us. it's perfect. I cannot be that perfect in my life, but I will try. I will do my best. I'm going to get as close as I possibly can. Because here is the standard of perfection, and God is pulling me up to that standard until eventually I'm so far up that I'm in heaven. That's the goal. But there is a standard of trust, of building trust in our relationships that Jesus, He's shown it to us. He's given us exactly what we should do, and yet we still mess it up. And God has forgiven us so many things. It's important that we forgive other Christians when they make mistakes. We looked at Matthew chapter 18 this morning at Kirby Pines. Think about the unforgiving servant. What was the servant forgiven? And then he turns around and he's unwilling to forgive. But very quickly for us, here are some basic things that we can do to build trust, because this is how God does it. Number one, fulfill your responsibility. You might say, stay in your lane. Fill your role. Do what you've been tasked to do. Every time, no matter what. That's the goal. You know, when you read Psalm 9, starting at the beginning, Lord, you are a just and righteous God. You judge the nations. You put the wicked to shame. See, God has a role in Psalm chapter 9. And then by the time you get to verse 9, he says, you're a safe haven for those who are oppressed and abused. And I trust in you because you've never forsaken anyone. But you see, God is righteous and just, and he judges harshly those who need harsh judgment. That's his role. And when I look at a just and fair God, I trust him. I trust him because he doesn't flitter around changing his personality depending on who he's dealing with. He is God, and he always will be. He is responsible for what he is responsible for, and he gets it done. He upholds all things by the word of his power. Could you imagine if he just decided to stop upholding all things? Well, I'm done. He could if he wants to, but he doesn't, and I trust him for it. Fulfill your responsibility. As a man, I have a responsibility to my spouse. I love her. Ephesians chapter 5, as Christ loves the church. I have to be ready to die for my spouse. I have to work. I have to provide. I have to care. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. What's my responsibility? Don't neglect my children, but teach them. Pay attention. Pay attention. And what does that mean? That means I have to take Evan, and Evan wants, it's 7:30, 8 p.m., I'm tired, and Evan wants to sit down and do nothing. But unfortunately, our son has a lot of energy. So there's hours of pay attention to someone else. It's not about you anymore. If it were, what would happen? I would neglect. And that's how all people are. You get to decide, am I going to focus on myself as a wolf in sheep's clothing? As Ananias and Sapphira? Or am I going to focus on someone else? I'm going to give. I'm going to make a sacrifice. That's what it means. I can't neglect. I can't neglect my spouse. I can't neglect my children. I can't neglect my church. I can't neglect my God. I have to put everyone ahead of myself. That's how it is as a Christian. I am dead, and my life is hid with God forever. I expect to go to heaven. So I can put myself to the side for a short period of time on this earth and move on. But fulfill the responsibility, and that is going to entail focusing on someone else every time. Always be dependable. You might say, keep your appointments. Now, this one, I don't always keep my appointments. And you might say, well, you didn't keep your appointment this time. What do you have to do? Well, I have to keep the next one. It's a simple concept. I say I'm going to do something. I do it. Well, what if I don't? Well, the next time I better do it. I better try. Try harder next time to keep that appointment. And people will begin to trust you. Follow through. How are we going to build the trust? Well, you don't throw your hands up in the air and say, I will give nobody the option to mistrust me. That's not the answer. The answer to building trust is take on the difficult role of I have a thing that people expect, and I will meet their expectations and exceed even if I can. I'll go the extra mile, Jesus would say. Be dependable. Fulfill your responsibility. Meet your appointments. Think about what the Hebrews writer would then write 2 verses later in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Look at Titus 1:2. We have to be dependable in the words that we say. How does God do it? We have hope of eternal life, which God, who never lies, promised before the ages began. If you say something and someone has to think, is he telling the truth? You have some work to do. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Now, you may be inclined to be a part of some crazy stuff. You know, I was up on Mount Everest the other day and I started hang gliding off of it and I saw this bird. And someone might say, are you telling the truth? Gage isn't here, but listen to some of his stories. And they're true. And you go, you were where, doing what, with who? Come on. And that's just how it is. Sometimes you're active. But people shouldn't have to guesstimate on, is this a true story or a false story? Always true. Are you dependable? Can they depend on your words? And then also, they have to depend on you in the things that you do. They will know you by your fruits. Indeed, Ecclesiastes 12:14. We just read this in our class this morning. I had to add it in here. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. It's all coming out. Every action. We have to be dependable. And then the next one, never forsake your loved ones. This is what God does. Never forsake your loved ones. That means don't leave them in their time of need. This is what I always think of when I get to this idea. I look at John chapter 18, starting in verse 1. Let's turn there together. I'm going to read verse 1 through 11. Now, Jesus was forgotten by his disciples. They are asleep. They can't keep their eyes open. Starting in verse 1, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" Okay. In every hard moment of your life, there is going to be a breaking point, a focal point where you have decisions that need to be made. And it's where the pressure is on. And someone may ask you a question. Your job has a meltdown. And they say, is this your fault? And you go, lie and save my skin, or tell the truth and face the consequences. This is the pivotal moment where Jesus is. Whom do you seek? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, now think about this. He never forsakes his loved ones. What is Jesus about to do? He's about to care for the whole world. Everyone is at stake. He's the only one that has to go to his death. And he says, I am he. Did the right thing. Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. So he asked them again, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. So, if you seek me, let these men go. Cared for his disciples. Even in that situation, he chooses to do the right thing, care for the other people, and then he has his disciples in mind. Let these ones go. This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. Of those whom you gave me, I have not lost one. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? I have to follow through. I'm responsible for this. I'm going to be dependable, and I'm not going to forsake you. That's what Jesus did. And then the last, this is how to build trust. You sacrifice yourself for other people. That's it. Your whole life. Sacrifice everything. You have time, personal goals, money, whatever it is, fame, a good name, whatever it is. I am going to live for Christ. I'm going to do whatever he says. And you will find that when you do this, you end up doing the right thing if you're following Christ. You end up looking more like him. The people around you appreciate you more. They trust you more because you're going to be honest like Jesus was honest. You're going to be loving like he was loving. You're going to take the time to focus on them like he focused on them. You'll do the right thing when the chips are down. And you'll never forsake the ones you love because who are you? You're the one that was put here for them. I was put on this earth for my spouse, for my children, for my family, to glorify God. And if I go, I get to go to heaven. But I'm going to do everything that I can while I'm on this earth to glorify him. If you have not accepted the Lord in baptism and made the ultimate sacrifice, God is saying, you can trust me. I will always be here. I will never leave you or forsake you. It's very hard to build trust. It's even harder to rebuild trust. But when you look at how Jesus did it and how the people trusted him, we get some idea on where to start. And what God is telling you this afternoon is that you should accept what he has to say and to seek him. He doesn't forsake those who seek him. You can put him on in baptism, bury yourself, make the ultimate sacrifice, and rise to walk as Christ. Let's look more and more like Christ every day. And your family will appreciate it, your friends, the church, God the Father, and you will have the greatest support system on this earth and in the life after this earth. If you need prayers, we are here to pray with you and to go to God on your behalf. But come forward while the song is being sung, and we'll take that prayer request. Let's stand and sing.